Bonjour mes amis, if you are watching this, c'était part of the asynchronous devoir. So we're going to talk a little bit about restaurants and dining in France and also do a couple of listening exercises and writing. So our new unité, our new chapter has to do about food, about ordering out in France, out in the world. And we're going to do that by talking about cafes. So, when you're at a cafe, how do you order something, right? The format that I have put on the screen is you'll put the pronoun, so who's ordering, I, she, they, this verb right here called aller. And we're going to talk about it. Don't stress too much about aller. And then this other verb called prendre. And then whatever it is that you want, food or an item. So for example, you're talking about yourself, you're at a restaurant, you would put je as in I. Vais means going to, right? It comes from aller. When I conjugate this, it's vais. Prendre is to take. And then the item is un coca. So I am going to take a Coke. Je vais prendre un coca. Here, je vais prendre une pomme. I'll take an apple. We don't really usually say I'll take this in English. Some people do, but it's usually I'll have or give me, right? But a very proper way of saying I'll take this, I'll have this is je vais prendre. Je vais prendre une salade. So you try. You might have to use your notes to look at what food item this is, and at the slide, the previous slide, to put the whole sentence together. So this item is une omelette. So you would write, je vais prendre une omelette. Next one. Both things. How would you say I want both things? I will take a chocolate ice cream and an orange juice. Write that out. Next one. What would you take here? Order this. All right, listen closely to the next 3 exercises. Si la personne a soif, choisis A. Si la personne a faim, choisis B. So if this person a soif, you'll pick A. And if this person a faim, you'll pick B. And if you don't know what a soif and a faim is, I'm going to include in the comment on the side the notes so that you can find soif and faim. The first one. Tu voudrais quoi, Coralie? Un jus d'orange. Tu voudrais quoi, Coralie? Un jus d'orange. Next one, next little skit. Et toi, Marie, tu vas prendre une coca? Non, je vais prendre une limonade. Et toi, Marie, Tu vas prendre un coca? Non, je vais prendre une limonade. Nicole, tu prends une glace? Non, pour moi, un jus d'orange. Nicole, tu prends une glace? Non, pour moi, un jus d'orange. Alright, so before we start talking about French dining and cafes and food, these are the comprehension questions to look for throughout. 1. Why are cafes like the Procop, La Couple, et Le Don famous? 2. What is the French equivalent or equal or the same as McDonald's? 3. Why have so many cafes and bistros disappeared since the beginning of the 20th century? So why are they gone? And then this question, we'll talk about it next week, but think about it. What kind of attitudes do French people hold toward American fast foods? How do they feel based on what you read, or if you want to do extra research, or a hypothesis, a guess? How do you think they feel about American fast foods? So, les cafés et les bistrots. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were about 500,000 cafes and bistros in France. Today, about 35,000 remain. Nevertheless, the French still think of the corner cafe as the place where regulars gather to talk about what's going on in the neighborhood and where friends meet to catch up on each other's life. The film Le Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain provides a glimpse into this tradition. Today, internet cafes and small resto or restaurants have replaced the cafes and bistros to serve the needs of their 21st century clientele. So before, it was a big thing to go to a cafe, right? And a cafe is not just like a Starbucks or a Dunkin' Donuts. A cafe is more like a Panera Bread, where you like sit down and you eat your food and you can catch up. A bistro is more of like a restaurant, right? More food, more like dinner food. So it was really big to hang out at those places and just catch up with your friends or spend a lot of time there. But now, internet cafes like Starbucks, right, where you can bring your laptop and get Wi-Fi, or smaller restaurants replace these cafes because people want to go to a cafe to work on their homework. So this movie is called Amélie in English, but in French, it's Le Fabuleux Destin d'Amélie Poulain. The last time I saw it, it was on Netflix. I do recommend watching it. It's great, but it centers around Amélie, who works at a brasserie, and it just gives you some ideas of like how important that is for regulars, for people who live in the neighborhood. So, many Parisian cafes have become famous over the years because of writers associated with them. In the 18th century, writer philosophers like Voltaire, who is a classic French writer, Voltaire met over coffee to discuss politics at the Café Procope. In the 1920s, American writers like Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and my favorite, James Baldwin, used to visit a lot La Couple, Le Dôme, et Le Select on le boulevard Montparnasse. So I don't know if you can see, but over here, this is a picture that says Montparnasse is literally just a street with a bunch of cafes, And so all these writers and artists and painters would just like, and philosophers would gather here and just sit and talk and talk and talk and get ideas from each other. And maybe most of you have read The Great Gatsby. He was a famous person that would just spend lots of time in Paris and at cafes. Le croissant, delicious, délicieux. So, le croissant is served in many French cafes. Similar in shape to an American crescent roll, it's a buttery, flaky pastry or bread. The word croissant first appeared in a dictionary in 1863, and the first recipe was published years later in 1891. But it's unclear when the croissant was first invented. So they don't really know who or when it was invented. But here on the side, this is what a typical American croissant looks like. And then a French croissant is not much, it's not as crescent. It's a little bit longer. And it tends to be flakier, a little bit more like, it's buttery, but it's kind of dry, it like breaks apart. Whereas an American croissant, sometimes softer. So we say croissant, croissant, croissant. En français, croissant. You want to sound like a pro when you go order it? Croissant. Les fast food. McDonald's or chez McDo. McDo is how they call McDonald's. McDo is the equivalent of one fast food chain in France. Quick is a French equivalent. So they have a McDo in France, but then they have their kind of like own brand called Quick. Both of these restaurant chains, as well as KFC, Subway, Pizza Hut, and Planet Sushi, can be found in towns, cities, and shopping malls all over France. Other French fast food restaurants include Blanche Paul de la France, La Brioche Dorée, and Pizza del Art. In addition to chain restaurants, there are snack shops everywhere. So little places you can get shops, like snacks to shop. They sell crepes, waffles, gyros, any other types of sandwiches, a lot of like Middle Eastern immigrant food, because France has a lot of immigrants, so they'll sell like kebabs. Some people in France call fast food mal bouffé because it has led to a lot of problems with obesity, diabetes, different medical problems. So fast foods do exist. They're not regarded as high, but young people love them, and because of the working people now, working moms and dads, it's easy to stop by one of these fast foods to get dinner. So La Brioche Dorée, there's two actually at O'Hare if you ever pop on by. Paul, oh my gosh, I did not know that Paul was considered fast food. But when I lived in Washington, D.C., they sell these massive macarons. I don't know if you can see them, they're right there. They're huge, they're like the size of my palm. And I would like stop by all the time after work at Paul to get one. They're so good, and they have like all of the breads, but it's fast food. So here is Flunch, and it's also fast food. And McDonald's, it looks nice and antique. And McDonald's en France, it does seem like fast food, but the environment is a little bit slower, where it seems like you gotta sit down and wait for your food. And the French fries are different. They try to cook it as healthy and as better as possible than like the US. So again, your questions to answer. Why are cafes like the Procop and La Coupe Don famous? What is the equivalent of McDonald's? And why have so many cafes and bistros disappeared since the beginning of the 20th century?